Welcome into this week's edition of RNN Talks right here on Racing News Now. As always, I'm your host, Garth Allen. Thank you for joining me tonight once again for another action-packed episode of RNN Talks. Tonight, our guest, we teased it a little bit on Monday's pole position. Tonight, we have IndyCar Radio Network pit reporter Ryan Myrehn on to talk about this past weekend's season opener for the IndyCar series in St. Petersburg, Florida. We'll also make some predictions for the upcoming NASCAR races this weekend in California at the Auto Club Speedway. But we're going to go ahead and now get right into this interview with Mr. Myrehn, and we'll see what he thinks about the action this weekend in St. Petersburg. Let's take a look. Now we're joined by Ryan Myrehn, pit reporter for the IndyCar Radio Network. Ryan, how are you doing today?
Hey, doing great, Garth. It's like old times.
It is. So a little background here. Ryan and I used to have a radio show together back in college, so kind of a little bit of a reunion here on RNN. It's great to have you on here, Ryan.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Always happy to talk racing.
Definitely. I understand that. So you were actually in St. Petersburg this weekend for the IndyCar race, now that you're a pit reporter for the IndyCar Radio Network. So let's talk about the rookies first off, because the rookies were very fast this weekend. I think probably the fastest crop of rookies we've had in IndyCar for a while, especially Robert Wickens, who led most of the race and started on the pole until the late skirmish, which we'll get to here in a few minutes. Talk to us about your first impressions of Wickens and the other rookies overall.
Well, this was my first impression of Robert as an IndyCar driver, but it's a name that I've known for a while back when he was in Champ Car Atlantics, and the fact that I just said Champ Car, that tells you all you need to know about how long ago that would have been. But this is a guy who really should be a big-time star by now already in North America. He went the European route. He came awfully close to getting to Formula One. Along the way, he won the Formula Renault 3.5 title, beating Daniel Ricciardo to the championship. And we know how good Daniel is in F1 these days. And for the last 5 or 6 years, he's been in DTM, which is a really high-level touring car series in Germany with major factory involvement from, it used to be Mercedes, which is who he drove for until they pulled out, but BMW heavily involved a couple other German manufacturers. And so as a consequence, he is a rookie because he's new to Indy cars, but he's not new to open wheel and he's not new to racing at a high level. So it was not a surprise to me to see him be fast. It was, however, a surprise for me to see him be fast this quick. And he was fast all throughout the weekend. I chatted with him a few times while I was down there, and I think he was surprised himself at how well it was going. Certainly the way it ended was not what he was hoping for, and we'll get to that later. But as for the rest of the group, I think Jordan King really impressed. I did not have high expectations for him. Zach Veach is a guy we've seen on the Mazda Road to Indy ladder, and he's won some races there. I thought he probably overachieved in his first weekend, to be honest. And Matthias Leist, we know he's fast. He's raw, though, and pretty inexperienced in the A.J. Foyt car. I think those are the rookies that really showed the best in my mind. And I think you're right. This is probably the best group we've seen in a long time, not just in terms of the numbers. And the numbers of rookies this year is pretty remarkable, but the talent as well. I think that has IndyCar in a pretty good place moving forward if these could be the stars of the series in the future.
Definitely. So now let's talk about that last restart. Wickens had led the majority of the race. I believe it was 69 laps that he led in this race. They take the final restart. Rossi dives it in really deep into turn one and sets up an accident between himself and Wickens. Talk us through just your impressions of that final restart.
Well, it started coming to the green in that final corner. And I think one thing that has come to light recently is that the pace car lights were not turned off the way that they are usually. Now, IndyCar has since said, we radioed all the teams to tell them we were going green, so there should have been information relayed to the drivers. But if you're a rookie driver, and every time in this race, your first race, that you've led the field to the green, the pace car lights have gone off when it's about to duck in, I could see how that might confuse you. And frankly, Robert Wickens got an awful restart. And that's where it all started. If he gets a good restart, we're not talking about any of this. And he doesn't even put himself in the position to be taken out by Rossi, which is ultimately what happened. I think that it was a racing incident. I think the stewards were correct in not issuing any penalties. If you're Alexander Rossi, you have to go for it. That's your chance to win the race. And if you're Robert Wickens, of course, you're not going to give him any more room than you have to because you want to win the race too. So I think the stewards made the right choice. It's really a bummer for Robert Wickens. I had the uncomfortable task of interviewing him for the radio broadcast when it was all said and done. And to his credit, he was a real pro about everything, but you could tell he was disappointed because what a miraculous start that would have been. He would have been the first IndyCar driver since Buzz Calkins in 1996 to win in his debut. So there's a stat and a name that your viewers probably haven't thought about in a long time.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so we've talked about the rookies. We've talked about the final restart. Ryan, before we wrap up here, let's just get your overall impressions of this race. Was this a good start to the IndyCar season? Would you consider this better than the typical season openers in the past? Worse? About the same?
I think it's better. The numbers that we saw, 370-something passes on track is what the series put out. That seems astronomically high to me, but hey, who am I to question it? I never took a math class at DePauw, so that no one would trust with a calculator, and nor should they. But that said, even if that number is somewhat inflated, it was still a lot of on-track action. That event, St. Pete, it's a really good way to start the season because it's such a festival. It's an event that the city has really embraced. And, man, I was entertained. Admittedly, my view was different than most, but I was never bored. And I hope that the fans watching or listening at home on the IndyCar Radio Network felt the same way. I thought it was a great start to the season, and the cars with the new aero looked really good. They raced really well, and man, I'm excited to see what happens moving forward.
Now, do you think there's any one thing you can pin this good start to the season on? Was it maybe the new car? Was it
it's the car.
Something else?
Yeah, I think so. I have to give Jay Fry and everyone at IndyCar a ton of credit. First thing they did is they made it look awesome. And that was their number one priority. The last couple generations of this car, it's raced well, even in the aero kit area, which made it more difficult to pass than it had been previously because of the extra aerodynamics, the extra aero wash coming off of the car. However, I thought the racing was still pretty solid, but the cars didn't look good. It didn't resonate with fans. These cars look like open-wheel racing cars ought to look, and as a consequence, I think that is going to draw people in, but you can't just have the aesthetics. They also did the smart thing, put the downforce generation more on the bottom of the car than with the wings, reducing the aero wash, making it possible to run closer together. So the combination of a car that looks absolutely sexy with good racing, opportunities to pass, compelling driver personalities, I think IndyCar's in a solid spot from that perspective. Now the task is, how do you get people to pay attention? You get the TV ratings up, the manufacturers, the sponsors, they come back, and that's the challenge. But in terms of everything you could hope for in the opener, I think it was there.
Definitely, I would agree with that. All right, so Ryan, you have any final thoughts on this race before we let you go?
It was fun. The biggest bummer is it's a good 3 or 4 weeks until the next one in Phoenix. It's too big of a layoff. They really need to plug something in between on the calendar because you have momentum now and then everyone forgets about it. And it doesn't help that you switch TV networks too between this race and the next one. I think the new TV deal we should be hearing about pretty soon. That gives me some hope for the future. So we'll see. But by and large, it was a good event. I was thrilled to be there with the IndyCar Radio folks and happy to talk about it with you.
All right. Well, we're having fun talking with you about it too. Ryan, thank you for coming on today. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we'll have you on again here very soon.
Pleasure is mine anytime.
All right. That's Ryan Myrehn, pit reporter for the IndyCar Radio Network. We'll have more with RNN Talks here in a moment, so stick with us. All right, our thanks to Ryan Myrehn for coming on tonight and chatting with us about the IndyCar season opener in St. Petersburg. Now we'll go ahead and make predictions for this weekend's action from the Auto Club Speedway in Fontana, California, and we will start off with Saturday's NASCAR Xfinity Series event, the 20th Annual California 300. And not a lot of Cup regulars in this race. It's interesting that these first 4 races have been pretty stacked with Cup regulars. And looking down through the entry list here, the only Cup regulars I see in this race are Austin Dillon and Joey Logano, unless I have looked over someone. No, that looks to be the only 2 Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series regulars in this weekend's Xfinity race in California. Austin Dillon and Joey Logano. That being said, I came very close to picking Joey Logano for this race, just given the fact that it's Joey Logano in an Xfinity race. But I went with my gut here. I picked him once already this year, and he did fantastic in the one race we picked him in this year. Didn't quite get the win. There were a few more Cup drivers in that race, though, so we'll see if Christopher Bell can finally put it in victory lane for the first time this season. It won't be his first victory in the Xfinity Series. Even though he is a rookie this year, he did get that victory last season in the Xfinity Series, so we will see if he is able to duplicate that this week in his GameStop Turtle Beach Toyota. So Christopher Bell, we're going to say, wins this week in California in the California 300. Now, moving on to the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series race for the weekend, that being the Auto Club 400. And this one, I think, may be one of the easier picks I have made all season. I say that now, and lo and behold, this pick probably isn't going to work out. But Kyle Larson has won. I should have looked this up, and I don't know the exact number, but I believe he has won the last 4, maybe 5 races on 2-mile tracks. It's been a lot here recently. He has been the king of the 2-mile tracks at California and Michigan. I think Kyle Larson parks it in victory lane once again this weekend and picks up his first win of the season in 2018. So that's our predictions. That will do it for tonight's edition of RNN Talks. Thank you for joining us tonight as always. And be sure to catch us on Monday on Pole Position. As always, I'm your host, Garth Allen, for Racing News Now.